And ladies and gentlemen, we are live here on December 6th of 2021. This is the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Phillips, and as always, I am joined alongside my co-host, the one and only Mr. Andrew Van Beber. V, how we doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm trying to decide whether we're in December or if we're in May or April or where the hell we are because it is sure as heck
Yeah.
not. I was outside in my shorts this weekend and was quite comfortable.
Yeah, I was in my shorts this morning and like afternoon, and then all of a sudden this evening, whenever I was picking up my daughter from daycare and coming back, it was freezing cold. And I am like, I was like, I can't believe how
Mm-hmm.
quick the change happened, but it's Missouri. So there's
That's the only thing you can
no
say.
reason why I
No,
shouldn't be prepared for this at this rate. But
no.
no, I'm fairly interested in to see what we're going to be looking at in the next couple of weeks. I mean, Christmas is just around the corner,
Yep.
and I'm interested to see if we're actually going to get snow on the ground. So it'll be
I
anyone's
thought we were
call.
supposed to get snow tomorrow, and then that all changed, and that was. I was like, oh man, come on. But no,
Yeah,
the we had Janine's brother came. We had Thanksgiving this weekend without the thanks. We had
awesome.
Thanksgiving. We had Thanksgiving pizza, but we wanted it just to
Hey,
be. We wanted it to be laid back this time, and so we had her brother in from Chicago, which was great. Um, and my sister in law gave me, who is a big podcast aficionado, whatever you
nice.
call it, gave me some tips on. So we're going to be trying a few things. And the first tip she actually said, if you look down, if you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, you can see down in the lower left hand corner our sponsors. There's American Traditional Coffee, and there is ours. I want to show some folks real quick. If I can get over to my other screen here real quick. This is, let me scroll back over to my page here. This is the American Traditional Coffee Company website. If you go over there and you look on that, you can go to their home screen there and it tells everything about the business. You can go to the store where you can purchase, Sean, what we have our coffee cups, we have our dark roast Colombian, the 15-ounce coffee mug, the American Traditional No BS shirt, the light
Oh yeah.
roast ground, the light roast whole bean. So there is quite a bit to go with there. And then of course if you go to, and I'm not going to pull up our, but we're on Facebook. My son and I's business is on facebook.com/V and Son DJ Services. Again, we have already booked 2 events for the upcoming year. We are excited about that. Starting on my second year, we're finishing up this weekend with our. I guess we're both going to be there at a wedding this weekend with Spencer and Devin. So
Yeah.
the last DJ event of the year, and maybe Sean and I can get a new photo for for the page.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll have to dapper out and
Yeah,
take a good photo together.
we
Yeah,
will.
that'd be
So,
great.
but anyway, man, what a week, right? What a week.
It has been insane, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Especially for me with work and everything that I've got going on this week. It is absolutely insane. Last week was absolutely insane, and the month it really doesn't even feel like it's barely started. We're
No,
already 6 days in.
right,
And so, yeah, I don't want to know what the beginning of 2022 is going to look like, how fast it's going to shuffle on through. So
right.
I'll be interested to see.
Well, with this whole thing, I guess of course, by the way, this is episode 40. Thank you for those of you who have been along with us through this. We targeted tonight. Sean and I both agreed that we needed to talk about this incident at Oxford High School and kind of where we're at in this whole. I hate to say that this is part of the new scene of what we're going to see in schools. School shootings. When I first started teaching, school shootings were. I mean, of course, it started with Columbine. Columbine was the
Mhm.
worst school shooting in U.S. history. And now it's just, I mean, you can say Sandy Hook, you can say, I forgot the school down in Florida already. But we have all of these school shootings. And what really angered me about this particular shooting, Sean, was the total, total preventability of it from,
Yeah, this was one of those ones that when you look and hear the reports about kind of what went down that day, I'm honestly kind of like it blows my mind um how this wasn't caught beforehand because here's like and maybe I'm wrong and because these things do happen all the time and it seems like the breadcrumb trail is always kind of there beforehand, but this was one of the first like really documented cases where we've seen that like this kid on his Instagram, on his YouTube
Mhm.
was like constantly just leaving some messages before all this was going to go down. And call me crazy, but I feel like these kind of things always get picked up on. Like they get reported and picked up on and then the individual is either apprehended beforehand or kind of interviewed beforehand and they kind of determine, hey, some kind of action needs to be done here. Whereas this was completely missed.
Well,
And then not only missed, but then completely neglected the day of the shooting.
right. I looked at this, and the one report that I seem to get the most information from when we go to my where the stuff that I had looked at multiple sources. The one that really told me a lot, and I've never went to this site before, but it's called, if you've heard of the Daily Beast. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the Daily Beast had, I mean, just probably the most the complete coverage of this from the beginning. So what we're looking at was, so this would be 2 weeks ago yesterday. The family went out. The Crumley family went out and purchased. What type of gun was this? I don't. Was it an? It was
It
a
was
nine
I think it was a 6R. It was a 9 millimeter.
nine. Yeah,
I want to say it's actually the same exact type of pistol that MPs now use with the military. We just got new SIGs. We switched from
yeah.
Berettas
That's what it was. It was.
M9s
You're
and
right.
to
It
the
is a
SIGs.
nine
Yeah.
millimeter Sig, right? And this was purchased. So the shooting occurred on would have been last Wednesday. Was Tuesday, and so it was 4 days. But so it wasn't last Sunday. It would have been 2 weeks ago, last Friday, that they purchased this.
Yeah, November 30th. It
Yes.
was when the
Yep.
shooting occurred.
So there
Yeah.
you go. And you were right. He was fairly active on YouTube. He had, playing games such as Call of Duty, showed him shooting hoops with his friends. And then he flaunted the newly purchased handgun in post on, like you said, on multiple sites. Okay.
Hmm.
Where I was really, really bothered by this though was that there were two teachers who were who had seen drawings on desk and drawings in his notebook of him holding a gun, doing shootings with, and just seeing. And one of the teachers actually took a picture of it and sent it to, and showed it to the administrator. And the administrator, of course, then they call in the young man and his parents, and they said, you need to take your son to counseling next 48 hours. And they're like, not going to happen. And then they release the kid back to class.
Yep.
And he goes to the bathroom where, after he was released from the principal's office, goes to the bath, just as soon as he leaves, goes and gets the gun out of the gun was in his bag in the principal's office.
Hmm.
Let that sink in just for a second. That's what pissed me off the most.
Hmm.
The gun was probably not less than 5 feet away from that principal in that office. That is a total failure of the whole thing right there. But, this the other thing though, Sean, that I was looking at with this though, this kid didn't totally fit the profile though, and this was maybe where he kind of slipped underneath the radar. This kid was a member of the school bowling team.
Hmm.
The bowling coach on his Facebook page as late as I think it was like a week before the shooting had a picture of this kid Chumley or Crumley was on there, and they showed him smiling with people, and I have you? I mean, you've worked with you and I both worked with a variety of people before. I
Hmm.
mean, is there? I mean, is it fair to stereo? Do you think there is a type of kid that people?
So there's always like that joke, right? Of like, that kid looks like he could shoot up a school, or that kid looks like they're going to shoot up a school. Um, which in my experience of like who you hear it from, or when you hear it, or when you see it, is like that awkward white kid, that kind of sits in the corner of the lunchroom by themselves, hunched over, always with issues, and they're like, oh, taking time bomb. And what we know, and here's the thing with this Ethan kid is we're going to find out more. We're obviously we'll get into here in a minute about what his parents are like. Um, but in a lot of these cases, you look at it's just weird. Like, do we know if this kid suffered any kind of abuse? Right, where in some of these cases with these shooters, that's typically the thing. Clearly, this kid is had uh, very sick mental health issues that um, should have been caught a lot sooner. This is a prime example, in my opinion, of kind of when you know there's a very clear issue with the kid, and the parent might be the kind of parent that's like, I'm not gonna medicate, but clearly they didn't even want to take him to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So when this kid is drawing images of people with bullets in them, and this is the same kid that had gotten caught. Here's the other thing that blows my mind. This is a kid that got caught looking up ammunition to buy
Ammunition.
for the weapon at school. And then his mother
Yeah.
texted him saying, I'm not mad at you. You just got to find out how not to get caught. LOL.
LOL.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
this
this.
this is
Mm-hmm.
learned behavior from a sadistic, moronic group, a set of parents. And again, like I said, we'll get into them here in a
Yep.
second. But
Yep.
I mean, it's I don't know what it is. I don't know if we ever will. But if you look at in the recent light since Columbine, and since there's just been more and more and more and more and more school shootings ever since, is there what has changed? What is the difference between 30 years ago and now? Why these numbers have absolutely skyrocketed? I mean, I remember that kid that, God, what was his name? It might have been the Florida shooter, the one that got caught after he went to like a sub sandwich place after he got done shooting up his school. I watched this like hour long kind of like documentary thing about him when he was being interrogated by police officers, and he tried to act crazy because for whatever reason in his head, I mean, clearly that wasn't thinking correctly anyway. In his head, he was thinking, oh, I'm just going to be able to plead insanity and be fine. And there's just this trend with these school shooters that are successful, that it's almost like, I wouldn't quite call it impulse. This kid clearly had a plan, but also he had only had the pistol for what, 3, 4 days.
Right. That. By the way, that
So
other
I
kid's name
mean,
was Nicholas Cruz.
yes, yeah, Nicholas Cruz. So it's like there's a switch almost that flips, and what is causing it, why it's happening. Um,
I don't know if you can.
this is one of those clear cut cases where I really can say we can blame the parents on
Yes.
this one, because
Yes.
there's other cases, and,
Yes.
and it's not just for people that shoot up schools. We're like, oh, where were the parents? And some parents do a great job, and some kids are just shit. So this is one of the case. No, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. And
one of our listeners did
yeah.
post in too, and this was another thing too, that at no the schools. So he said the our listener asked why didn't they get the cops involved? Well, the resource officer, which is and it's not your from what I've read about Oxford's, they have a basically it's a private security company. It's not even a actual police officer.
Hmm.
That they informed them, and that was about it. But you know, the root of all of these problems, okay, and I think this is people say that this is too simplistic to take this view, but let's just break it down to where we're at. We can break this down. Let's start with me and you, okay? Both of us
Hmm.
have young children,
Hmm.
okay? Now, the way that you and I interact with society. Now, you and I are both in public servant jobs, okay?
Hmm.
We are trained. We interact with we. You and I are both social creatures too. We're both extroverts. When we're out and we engage the whole room. We introduce our families. This is my daughter. This is my son. This is my wife. This is my girlfriend. Whatever, however you want to say it, and we interact. And people and our kids see us how we interact, and then how we interact with our significant other. That we don't. I mean, I know how if you mistreat your girlfriend, she'll backhand you anyway. But if I back,
Hmm.
if I we our so our kids see how we interact with other people in the community. They see us how we interact with each other. Okay, then so that's your tight circle. Okay, so then you go out, and there's just these concentric circles. So as you move out, then you've obviously we've discussed community. Okay, now you get out even farther. Now, how do you discuss world events? How do you discuss how to deal with your problems? You're and that's the other thing too. So your kids will see how you deal with your issues. Do you go ballistic? Do you just fly straight off the handle in front of your kids about the problems you're having? Do your kids see you talk about money issues? Do they see you talk about how, I guess you could say, how shielded are you keeping your kids
Hmm.
from real world problems? And then do they, and like you said, we'll get to these parents in just a second. But as you go further out, then I mean, it goes to, okay, how do we talk about our nation, how we talk about our president? And you know even though I don't agree with Joe Biden, one of my kids one time, Bryson, came home one time and said, well, they're saying at school that Joe Biden burnt down a children's hospital. Is that true? And I'm like, no, son, that's not true. That's not true. We respect our presidents. We respect our leaders. And of course, in our household, our Christian values, he said, the leader that is in place, God put that person in place, whether we like them or not. And so we have to respect our leaders, even though we may not agree with them. We respect the position of which they are in, and you respect authority. And you talk to your kids about how to, if you're having issues, and this is something that this is a little bit personal, but my son internalizes a lot when his
Hmm.
feelings are hurt, but we work with him constantly about, okay, if you're upset about something, we need to share, we need to talk. And it's not making my son soft or it's making him less manly. It's about vocalizing, you
Hmm.
know, instead of, okay, I'm going to go and, I'm going to express myself through social media. I'm going to express myself by getting my feelings out, you know, well, we're going to go to the gun range, or we're going to, you know, there has to be, if there's not active lines of communication, I think first and foremost there has to be active lines of communication from top to
Hmm.
bottom, from your innermost circle all the way out. And I part of our societal breakdown is that we're not taught how to interact. We're not teaching how to interact. We're not teaching how to vocalize or voice problems. And there's so many different routes that you can go out with this, but I mean, I would start with those.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the big things that kind of talk about, especially to young men that I work with in my job. Because I try to talk to the people that I'm working with pretty frequently. Because, you know, for some folks, especially some that are joining the military, in some cases, the military is their way out of a bad situation in which they find
Right.
themselves,
Right.
or a situation that they don't want to be in. And so, oftentimes, if I, talk to a lot of these guys, that the first things I'll ask is, how's everything at home going? Um, what can I do to kind of help set them up for success, not just with, school and finances, but also as a young man in an ever changing world. And, a lot of times some of them will say, they'll kind of say, yeah, things are okay. And it'll tell me like, hey man, like I understand, kind of wanting to hold it back a little bit because not everyone needs to know. But at the end of the day, if there's something bothering you, it's okay to speak about it. Like,
Right.
I'm not here to judge, and that's what I'm here for. I'm not your buddies that you see at school all the time, 9 to 5. I'm not a teacher that's gonna, be pestering you daily. Like, what's the deal? Um, and a lot of times they open up. And I know, like you for example, in high school, there were a lot of people that were able to come talk to you and were able to express their feelings and kind of what they had going on. And I think that what people don't realize is how much that can actually benefit a lot of people that do struggle internally, is just having that outlet. And
I think part of the problem is too, and this is something that can't be helped. This was described as a small school, but then so I went to the school's website. Of course, they've taken a lot of stuff down, but
mhm.
what I gathered from looking at this, so um, the enrollment numbers that I was able to see. Now I don't know if this was. I believe that because I went, they had different pages for the high school. They have like 5 or 6 elementaries. And so I was on the high school page and I went to their, so then they have every school has their financials and everything and their enrollment numbers. And they show them with an enrollment of 1,700 kids. So I'm assuming that in the
Wow.
high school, 9 through 12, there is 1,700 kids. Um, Part of the reason why I had an offer, I have had offers to teach at Troy and at Hannibal. And I turned both of those down because, and we're seeing a lot of teachers leave the bigger schools because the kids in these bigger schools, it's harder to have an active relationship with kids. Not just kid,
Mhm.
not, I mean, if you've got a kid who's really standing out and who makes an effort and is, it's easy to identify with that kid. But when I student taught at Hannibal, I taught up on the third floor. It would have been in the south, would have been the southwest corner. All right. I saw my students that I saw one time a day. Okay. When third floor, southwest wing is in Hannibal High School. I don't know if it's that way anymore, but it was the history wing. Okay. Those
Mhm.
kids came to that part of the building simply for history. And then they would go down to the other end of the hallway for English, and then they would go downstairs one flight for that's your math floor, and then down on your main floor, then you have access to, your elective classes and everything. And so you see when you have a population that large, it's hard to see, and you can't connect with a kid throughout the day. So when I see a student in K through 12 at Clopton, we have 475. Okay,
Mhm.
475. And so when my kids hit the door in the morning, I would say on average, I'll see them 4 to 5 times a day, if not 6 times a day in between classing and in between passing in classes. And you can gauge a kid's response when they come in and I know my kids. I know what they look like. I know how they act. I know how they greet me. I know how some of them, every time they see me, they'll come up and give me a hug or they'll give me a fist bump or they'll do whatever. And if something's not off, I can usually, and the other teachers too, can gauge it. And
Mhm.
then I can, I'll pick up the phone and we'll do this. And it's not to gossip about kids. It's just to check on kids. We'll call, hey, keep an eye on such and such today because they weren't, how were they acting in class today? And then if one of them says, man, they were really acting off today, then we can pull that kid aside and say, hey, man, what's going on? Can you tell us, is there something, or it's something at
Mm,
home or, you know, but in a big school, they see it as, oh, that kid's just a, he's a whatever label,
mhm.
insert label here. Okay. And because you have schools like in Missouri to be relatable, you have the Hannibals, you have the Troys, you have the Camdentons, you have the Warrentons, you have these schools where they're averaging 25 to 30 kids a classroom. It's just enough for the teacher to maintain, you know, classroom behavior and keep them focused for however many minutes. And they're not really locked in. I can't say this for every
Yeah.
teacher, it would be a generalization, but it would be harder to be locked in on a student. My largest class is 30 kids, and that's one time a day. Every other class I have is 20 and below. And to me, that
Mhm.
is the ideal because I can, after 25 years, I have pretty decent classroom management skills, and I can look and say, man, why is that kid acting out? Or why, you know, and I mean, there was times that you and other guys, like you said, walk by my room. Hey, knock, knock, knock. V, can we come in and talk? Sure.
Mhm.
And the situation, if it was something that could spill over, you know, I mean, at Clopton, in my 19 years at Clopton, now there's been, not to say that there won't be fights or there won't be altercations, but and it's the parents of our community who have instilled certain values. Some of them, are far right, maybe some of them are left, but a core consensual value that we have is we discuss our problems.
Mhm.
We, hey, you know, even though some people may not, oh, that logum and blah blah blah, or that Van Bear, but they know there's a respect. That person is a principal, and they're put in charge, and they're put in a place, and you respect that authority. You respect them, and if you don't respect them, there'll be problems.
Yeah. And I see it in the schools that I go into just because I go to I go to a huge variety. You know, there are two schools particularly in this area that if we decide that, hey, this is our long-term spot where we're settling down, there are two, maybe three schools in particularly that I have my eye on for our kids to grow up and go to school at out here. And they're smaller schools. One of them's a 3A, but I mean they're on the smaller side of
Mm-hmm.
things where even at the 3A, the teachers know every student.
Right.
Whereas I go to some of my big schools, and again, it's just my own ignorance of me expecting to, when I go to my small schools, if I have an application for, a young man or a young woman, and I take the application to the secretary and I'm like, hey, this is for this person, they go, oh, all right, I'll call them right down. Versus I'll go to my big schools where there's like 8 counselors, and I'll go and I'll say, hey, I've got this packet for so and so. And they'll say, who? And I'll
Mm-mm.
say, this person, they're a junior. What class are they in? I I don't know.
Right.
Okay, give me a second. Go back there. They'll type in their name. Is this person even a student here? Yes, I promise. I met them here. Okay. And then, all right, yep, we'll get it to them eventually. And it's just like there's a huge disconnect. Actually, at one of the bigger schools I was at the other day, I stopped the fight from happening because while on a lunch visit, because the faculty just was like kind of just staring and sitting around. And I see it, and those big schools, there is such a disconnect between some of the students, because there are some students that I can tell at these big schools that try, that do care, that are going to be outstanding, moving forward in life and moving forward in school. And then I see other students that it is just, there is not an ounce of respect towards anybody that's walking those halls. Like, they'll be in there screaming, yelling curse words at the top of their lungs, and have a teacher like, hey, man, can you stop? They'll look at the teacher for a second, literally eye roll, and go right back to what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. And then instead of like fixing the problem, trying to lay it, the teacher will be defeated and walk away, because why deal with the consequences of trying to get that student to calm down.
and
I mean,
and
it's just over and over and over again. I never see that at my small schools. I just don't.
do you think it? Do you think? And I mean, I'd like to get your feet on this. Do you think it's about being afraid of repercussions from parents, or just dealing
A
with
hundred
bad?
percent.
Yeah.
I think not only that, but this is gonna. I don't want to sound like I'm putting my foot in my mouth, but I think a lot of it too is, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's really easy for students, especially nowadays with social media, to try to flip and create a false narrative that's going to stick without it, being real. If a teacher was to yell at a student or try to do something, what's the first thing their friends are going to do? They're going to bust out their cell phone,
Start recording it.
start filming the teacher. Oh, look at what this teacher's doing to this student. Oh, because of this, because of this, because of this. And like we saw a false narrative of how quick it goes. So during the Oxford shooting, there was a group of students in a classroom that were talking to a sheriff's deputy, and this was right after, I'm assuming, the
Hmm.
shooter was apprehended, or in a side of the building where these students didn't know. The sheriff's deputy is talking, and again, he has to realize how stupid he is. Because I mean, understand there's a time and there's a place to try to be the cool hip cop, and then there's times to be the most professional in the room. During a school shooting, the last thing you want to do is try to sound like the lingo of the kids. um so there was a video that was circulating that, of course, every time I saw it, it was shooter tries to impersonate police officer or sheriff's deputy in order to gain access to classroom. That's not true, but it was that quick. It was one video uploaded, and then thousands of times it was circulated as that was fact. It was he was trying to impersonate a cop, which it wasn't the case. Shooter had already been apprehended. Sheriff's deputy is calling out, letting classrooms know they're all clear. Gets to a classroom where the students are still locked in there and says, "Hey, you guys can come out." The students, obviously being terrified, are like, "No, we don't
And that
we don't
and
want to take that risk right now." And then the sheriff's deputy goes, "Come to the door and look at my badge, bro."
yeah, and
And
that
I,
right.
oh, as someone, as a military police officer who's trained on active shooters, who's trained on working with individuals that have just been through traumatic experiences, no, 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 no,
You know,
no. I mean, I could not believe how stupid and how arrogant that sheriff's deputy was in that moment. I get, maybe they're just trying to do anything they can, but if there's been a teenage shooter at a school that was a student, why in God's name would you try to sound like a teenager when trying to
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 open the door,
mitigate the
right.
situation? Yeah,
Well, and
I
that,
mean, just a complete lapse of judgment, and it's just it was more frustrating. I just couldn't believe what was coming out of his mouth.
well, and then I saw the video. I mean, these kids, and this is the other thing. You mentioned the social media. So there was, I mean, there were TikToks, there were Snapchats, there were Facebook Lives with this whole thing happening.
One of the most documented school shootings in history.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
they had, like you said, they had the one, there was the one where they came to the door and it was a sheriff's deputy and they're like, oh, and I heard him say, bro, and I'm like, come see my, let me in, bro.
Come to the door and see my badge,
I
bro.
mean,
That like
that's,
yeah.
I mean, and I applaud some. I mean, these teachers who were doing things the right way. Some of the, I mean, I saw a lot of good training skills paying off. And I mean, this is from years of just seeing active shooter training at our school. Teachers barricading doors, giving kids
Mhm.
books, giving them, giving the kids scissors, anything they could use. If that kid shot through that window, where they could annihilate the holy living hell out of that kid if he came in the room, And then I saw another teacher who, this was through the social media one, where the teacher said, we're barricading the door. Now that they had the door was secure, they took a desk and they broke the window out. And he, you know, and I applaud the teachers of Oxford High School because they did their what they were trained to do. They weren't sending
Mhm.
kids out in the hallways. They were barricading doors. They were locking doors. The principal came over the loudspeaker. This is not a drill, and the kids responded. I mean, it is very tragic that 4 lives were lost, but yet thousands were saved because
Mhm.
teachers did. That this is something that is addressed, and I hate to say it as a matter of if, but a matter of when. I mean, anymore, the odds of a school shooting happening, it. I mean, we've lost. I've lost track. And it's sad for me to say. I mean, I remember when it was Columbine, and Columbine. When you look at the how teachers responded at Columbine, oh my gosh, hide under the table like it's a tornado drill, not
Mhm.
barricading the doors, not and kids just everywhere,
Yeah.
and what I believe that you know teachers have done their job. Teachers have done their job. We've received the training as a person who has been through. The Pike County Sheriff's Department has done a great job in the past. It's been about one every 3 or 4 years. They come in every year. They'll come in every year and they'll
Mhm.
talk to us, and then they will, and then just as a refresher, we'll have okay, we're gonna be out in the hallways firing off, blanks and whatever else and all this other
Mhm.
stuff. And I mean, I mean, I couldn't do that every year because that is traumatic. Because when you hear, I mean, and it
The
literally does,
pops.
yeah,
Yeah.
it literally does sound like firecrackers going off in the hallway. But these guys are using dummy rounds in 9 millimeters. They're using, and it's just pop, 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 pop. And it's traumatic. I mean, we've had some of our teachers who just, oh my god, and he's like, okay, this is our training. Okay, here's what we do, and barricade the desk. Some and I applaud our school last year. What do we need to do to make our school safer?
Mhm.
And had, we have these secure cameras. I mean, you got to push to open to get in. You've got the thick glass. The front doors that were used to be at our school that were all glass are now steel doors with the little tiny light windows in there.
Mhm.
And so I mean, we've taken the advice, we have cameras everywhere. Okay. And there's some schools that I've read in doing some research over this who went even a step further. One of these places, I did not write this one down, but it was called, and I know it was in Mississippi. I can't think of where it was at in Mississippi, but this school actually has, so it basically has these dispensers in the hallway that will drop down, and it's totally at the principal's. He's got the only one who's access to it, and the counselor and everybody else. But they have this. It'll drop smoke pellets in the hallway. It will set off the fire alarms, and they're flashing lights and wah wah, and all that stuff. And I mean, there are some schools who will go to the absolute limit and say, our children are our most valuable asset, you know, and we're going to protect them at whatever cost. And then there are just some schools who are just like, okay. And that's the other thing too. I think in these bigger schools, it's easier to get a weapon in. I mean,
Yeah, well, and see, that's like, do you? I mean, I remember it was always kind of like a running joke at some of the inner city, like St. Louis schools or Kansas City schools that have metal detectors when would walk in and all. But I legitimately believe that there's a good chance that eventually the entire, all the school districts in Missouri could go to, you have to have a clear backpack. You have
yes,
to go in with a clear backpack. Eventually, they'll get to the point where students might have to be wanded and might have to go through metal detectors, even at small schools. Um, I think I'm not saying that's like next year, but I'm saying it's a
right,
possibility. I
right.
would say we are probably getting closer to where there's a good chance that every single school will have a resource officer.
They
I
have.
think
I
that
mean,
there
that's
there
got
are
to
possibilities because a lot
right.
of the
Go ahead.
because the high schools I go to for the most part, all of them now, all the doors are locked. Which I remember back in the day, Even at Clopton, it's changed now,
Yeah.
thank God. But back in the day, you could just
Yeah.
nosy on in there, and they're like, I know you're going through. Um, and now that's not the case at all my schools now. I have to be buzzed in at
Mm-hmm.
all of them. I have to be signed in. I have to
Mm-hmm.
be checked in everywhere I go. And I'm a familiar face at a lot of these schools, so um,
But
it's
still,
definitely
yeah, and teacher, we're taught that if we see somebody that somehow who slips through the cracks or somehow, we are told engage with somebody who is not supposed to be there. Can I
mhm,
help you? Where do you need to go? Who are you looking for? Not just look the other way and say, "Oh, well, I guess they know where they're going," because
mhm.
I mean, the threat is real, and we have to address it. And I want to get back, and we were going to talk about this. Let's get back to these parents real quick.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually just about to bring that up.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
these two bozos, and so we know that the mom was one of those big Trump or bust kind of people. I read that
Yep, I
blog post that
I
she
did. I
had.
did too.
I
I
don't
did too.
remember it verbatim, but
I'll bring it
her
up here.
talking about how she didn't care about how he said, I don't care that you said you grab women by the poontang. I don't care about none of that.
Can I read a
You
little
know,
bit of this? Up?
yeah. Please, please,
Okay,
please
so
do.
this is Mr. Trump. I actually love that you are a bad public speaker because that showed sincerity and humility. You changed your mind and you said, "So what?" You made the famous "grab them in the pussy" comment. Did it offend me? No. I say things all the time that people take the wrong take the wrong way. Do I mean them? Not always. Do I agree with them? Should have shown your tax returns? No. I don't care what you do or maybe pay in taxes. I think those are personal, and if the government can lock someone up over $10,000 of unpaid taxes and you slipped on by, then that shows the corruption. Um, she hoped he would really, quote, uncover the politicians for what I believe they are, shut down Big Pharma, and make health care affordable for me and my middle class family again. And then said, as a female and a realtor, thank you for allowing my right to bear arms, allowing me to be protected if I show a home with someone with bad intentions. Thank you for respecting that amendment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we can't sit there and say that this was like Trump ideology's fault because we know a lot of people that like Trump that's hasn't gone and shot up a school.
Right.
Um, but I'll be interested to see if Trump does decide to run for re-election. I would assume that questions about this family will be brought up, to him, and seeing his response will actually be quite interesting. But one thing is, it really goes to show, these parents knew. They knew exactly what their son was going to do because before the name of the shooter was even announced, the mother texted her son,
Don't do
Ethan,
it.
don't do it.
Don't do it.
Um, we know that they are full blown cowards. Not even very intelligent cowards, but they're cowards. Um, as they tried to flee, and some people were saying they were guessing that they were trying to make a break for Canada, which my thing is like, okay, well, what happens once you get to Canada? What do you think the Canadian government's just be like? No, you
You're
guys are
you're good.
good
Right.
to kind of chill here. No, it's not like fleeing to Mexico or like South America or something where it's like, yeah, we're all breaking the law, dude. Who cares? Like it was very, very, very vastly kind of different place where you're trying to escape. Um, so yeah,
Well, let me ask you
it
this: What?
yeah.
So the weekend before, and this is on the mother's Facebook page, was her and her son, going out to test out the new, Christmas gift, and her and her son at a shooting range. And there's nothing wrong with going to a shooting range,
No.
but is there? I have a problem if there. It just seems like, oh, we've got a gun and we're gonna, it's like when I get a gun, I mean, I'm going to be buying a hunting rifle in the next year for next year's deer season.
Mhm.
My shotgun right now is hidden in this house. My kids do
Mhm.
not know where the shotgun is at. I keep the ammo on the other side of the house, and I keep around where I need it in case of an emergency. But I don't glorify. I mean, and I'm an avid gun person. I love to hunt. I love to shoot when I get a chance. My neighbor across the street owns the pawn shop, and he said, "Hey, come on out and we'll shoot it." He's got a range out by his pawn. Definitely,
Mhm.
there's a difference between being a gun enthusiast and a gun worshiper.
Yes.
And when I look at this case, this seems like it's more, I'm going to try my baby out. Okay. And then this kid takes it to, because the amount of digital and hard copy evidence of premeditation that they have against this kid and
Mhm.
his family
Bit is a lot.
is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I mean, what when so when your daughter gets to, she's only 2 right now, correct? And
Mhm.
so when she
Correct.
gets to that, I mean, how do how do you, I mean, because you carry you I mean, you're military, so how do you
Mhm.
approach discussing guns and discussing this kind of stuff with kids? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you feel on that?
I mean, it's a huge level of respect. I respect guns a lot. Um, you know, there's going to be a time and a place because one of my big things is getting Tony trained on how to use a
Mm-hmm.
weapon,
Mm-hmm.
and I want my daughter to know how to use a weapon. But I'm not going to knock any kind of interest she has or whatever kind of dream she has. But I think there needs to be a clear distinction and understanding of what power is kind of held when you're holding a weapon, and the
Responsibility as
level
well.
of responsibility and respect that you
Mm-hmm.
need to have. I mean, um, when it comes time, like I want her to understand the fundamentals. I want her to know how to use it correctly. But I there's a big level of understanding that we use guns for self-defense, not for self-advance. It's there's a big level of understanding what they're used for. They're used to provide food. They are used for protection. They're not to be used to go out to destroy.
Right.
And they're not toys. They're not toys that you just play with. And I think that's part of the problem is with a lot of folks that we talk about that are big gun people. Again, I don't have anything against weapons. Um, I don't really have anything against people owning guns. Um, me personally, I think it's when guns become your identity of like, ooh, this day, whatever. People have their own interest, but at the same token, I do it annoys me when people act like there is not a problem when it comes to weapons in the United States.
Right.
We do have a gun problem, and I think that's if you look at like
I,
we rank, with you look at other underdeveloped countries where they have a lot of mass shootings and stuff. Still, we still rank amongst them as the United States. And then you look at developed nations, and we are by far of like per 100,000 deaths, we are way higher than most developed countries.
I I agree. I agree with you to a point in this. There's a there's a gun problem, but there's more of a people problem than there is a gun problem.
Sure. Well,
And the
and I
way
agree that there's a people problem, but in the same token, because we have a people problem, we also have more access to the most efficient method of killing, as opposed to other nations. Where you look at other nations where they don't have gun problems, right? There might be more stabbings. There's
Correct.
plenty more stabbings, but the difference between the amount of damage one can do with a knife, and here's the thing: there's times where people go on rampages and stab 12 people to death. I'm
Right.
not acting
Right.
like that's not something that happens. However, that doesn't happen once a month. When that happens, it's like, holy shit, they killed how many people with a knife? Versus now these shootings, they're every day. Like I don't even remember the names of the people that like we remember Columbine. We remember because it was like we remember it. We remember Aurora. We remember the theater shooting in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's so many shootings. I don't know
Oh, it's hard to
where
keep track.
they happen. There's so many, and because and again I don't want to take weapons away from anybody.
Nope.
However, I do want to ensure that we keep weapons out of the hands of 15-year-olds that are going to go around shooting schools. I want to keep weapons out of individuals like Kyle Rittenhouse's hands, so he
Yep.
doesn't go and kill
That's
people.
and I was
And I want to
that's where I was
keep
going. Yep.
and I want to keep guns out of the hands of the people that tried shooting at Kyle Rittenhouse. Like what we need to understand is both sides need to understand bad guys will have access to guns and they will get those guns. But
Legislating it will not. I want to emphasize my strong just a strong point I have here, and I'll let you continue.
Mhm,
Legislation of weapons is not the issue because you just said it right there. People will always find a way to
mhm.
get a weapon. They will find a way to get a gun. You know, but anyway, continue with your thought there. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, you're good. I with you, I agree to a point of legislation isn't it's never going to be perfect, and I'm a firm believer in the more legislation you get down, that's dangerous water.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
very, very dangerous water. But what I hate is when there are, steps, preventative measures. Like I'm a firm believer, and many people would disagree with me. I don't believe you should be able to go and get a weapon overnight. I don't
No.
I don't believe it should be that fast. And yeah, and here's the thing. I hate to when I hear like, oh, well, you have to go through a background check, you have to do XYZ. Very, very clearly, they're not the most in depth. It's not rocket science. There are people that because that's the thing too is look at individuals that are able to get their hands on weapons well they didn't there was nothing wrong with them. There was no criminal record, there was no nothing beforehand. Okay, well,
They got through the yeah.
why don't we have to have mental health screenings before we buy weapons? I mean,
Do you
if
think
you
that
look
that
at
but do you think that something like that will when you say slippery slope with legislation, to me that's a real I mean, I agree with you on that. That yes, mental but you're getting in when you start getting to the point where you get into the person's
because it's a bias. I mean, because
yes,
it's what
yes,
based off
thank you.
the
Yes.
yeah. I mean, and that's tough. But look at like we also were the leading nation of death by suicide to guns.
True.
So I mean, who knows? Who knows what the solution is? Because like I said, I don't know, and I think that's why we're always going to have this battle. And then it's tough when you have people that are like, look, clearly there's an issue. We got to solve this issue, and I'm willing to have the conversation. And then their voice is outweighed by those that are like, nope, take all of them, take every single one of them.
Right.
And
And
then you got the big bolsters of the NRA that are like, fuck it, we just want to give everybody a weapon
right.
and pass it out and
Well,
celebrate that we have them. So it's
I
tough. It's tough.
and I don't okay, so here's where let me so I don't agree with the argument 100%. Well, if everybody's carrying, then we know that we'll cut down on crime because one guy. But then that turns into a system of just straight up vigilanteism. Okay, so there's that, like you said, give everybody a gun. There's the far extreme on that one. The far extreme on the other side, like you said, take all the guns. Okay, which that presents problems. Instead, the issue that we have to look at, and I'll go back to what I started with at the beginning of our broadcast tonight, is it is a people issue, and looking at as a generation to generation to generation, we have really loosened our belts as to what we allow to consider to be okay. You know, when we say, well, if that kid punches you in the nose, I give you, you've got my permission to bop him back. You know, and then when you try to recommend anything about talking, oh, you're emasculating my kids, you know, and all this other stuff. No, we're not, because we don't live in the same generation that you lived in. Parents, grandparents have to get past this whole good old day mentality of, well, we just duke it out and then we go talk about it later. Those aren't these times. Mm-hmm. Okay? The generation that I grew up in, yes, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And yes, we did kick each other's ass whenever we got in trouble and had issues with stuff. And then but nobody ever thought about bringing a gun. Heck, we had guys who came in from the deer stand on deer season, came in, and we had probably more rifles out in the parking lot than they did at the police department. But nobody thought about going out to their car, getting their gun, and coming in and just laying a shot down on somebody's forehead. We did not look at that. Now, to move forward, parents have got to start doing their job of being parents. Stop plugging your kid constantly into video games. Stop allowing them to be manipulated by this little box that you know, I put stringent limits on my kids how much time they have on their phone. Mm-hmm. You know, I put enough time on there for them when we go to school, when we come back, and then maybe 45 minutes at home. It's roughly about 2 hours and 15 minutes, 3 hours, somewhere in there. Okay? And then when I see, hey, my son's been on the Bryson, get up, get off, go, you know. Whereas my daughter, she does crafts, and she does stuff, and my daughter's good about it. She verbalizes, but when you see the majority of these kids who have been doing the shooting, and I hate to say this, and I would almost bet that it's 99% male. It's, you know,
it is. It really is. And I'll say it to peeve it's white guys. It's like not, it fits the mold.
You don't see black kids coming and shooting up the school. It's white kids, and it's not poor white kids. When you look at these kids who are doing these shootings, they come from middle to, upper class families. And I'm surprised. It may have been done. I haven't seen it yet. But if some psychologists or sociologists would sit down and study and put all of these, we've had a wide enough test sample now. I hate to say it that way, but we've had a wide enough test sample now that kids you can say, okay, what are our common factors here? And when I looked at Columbine was a perfect example. The kids from Columbine was an affluent suburb of it was either Denver or Colorado. I think it was Denver. But you look at all, the Paducah school shootings. I mean, middle class kids. Okay, the Florida shooting was in a affluent school. It wasn't an inner city school district, and that's not to say that we had a stabbing death at a school in Springfield, Illinois, 2 weeks ago. A place where a school where when I'm doing my Ubering on my Mondays, on my days off, who I've given rides to kids from the school before, and there was a knifing there. But when you look at these on a large scale, it's happening with your upper end kids whose parents don't parent. I applaud people from. I still think I still believe that a large portion of your middle to your lower class still try to take an active part in their kids' life. Especially, I see that at our school. These parents want to know. I mean, I had basketball practice tonight. I had 4 dads in there. I don't care. I want
Hmm.
those dads to be there. I don't care. Come in
Yep.
and watch. Come in and so your daughter knows, hey, I'm here for you. I'm supporting you in this. Come to your kids, whatever. Take interest when your kid comes home. Don't let them just go straight back to their room. How was your day? Sit down around the table. Have a meal together. Talk to each other.
Hmm. Yeah. Involvement is huge.
It is. So
Huh.
we feel for these kids. I knew this was going to be. We've had a number of different folks who've come on with us here tonight, and and Sean and this was a touchy subject that Sean and I wanted to discuss. And by the way, Sean and I did reach out to a number of different people to come on to talk about this. And this is an issue that people don't want to talk about. They don't want their
Hmm.
opinions out there. But to all our listeners, this is especially if you have children, these are conversations that you need to be having with your kids about
Big time.
expression, proper expressions of anger, of, that it's okay to be upset, but we talk it out and we work it out and we move past it. We don't, this, I mean, it begins in the home. It begins in the home.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to kind of see what moves forward with this one.
Right.
The punishment for the kid and
They
for the parents.
and they are going to try the young.
Um,
They are going to try the young man as an adult on,
mhm.
and it's going to be murder one because it was
Yeah.
definitely premeditated.
Hmm.
Like I said, the hard copy
Does
evidence.
Michigan have the death penalty?
I don't know if they do or not. I mean, they like I said, how this kid was a sophomore, so that would put him at.
I think it was 15.
So he's 15. If Michigan has the death penalty, let me look here real quick. But I mean, if that's the case, you know,
It looks like they do. Looks like, oh, we'll see. I'm seeing two different things. This says Michigan does not have the death penalty. However, history of death penalty, 13 executions have been carried out in Michigan. However, it seems like a lot of those were from quite. Looks like death penalty has been constitutionally banned in
yep,
Michigan since
yep, yep.
1963.
It was.
Okay.
I just saw that. Yep, and it took
So
effect.
no death penalty, but
Yep,
he
Jen,
will probably get his salad tossed around a couple times
and
in the pen.
it was the first state, and it was the first state to ban the death penalty.
Mm,
Hmm.
hmm, interesting. Well,
Well, if they try him as an adult, I mean, yeah, he's going to be somebody's boyfriend, and he's going to. I mean, he will spend the rest of his life in jail.
yeah, yeah. I'll be interested to see if I highly doubt they even put him in general pop. He'll
No,
probably
yeah,
be stuck being chatty Cathy's with prison guards for the rest of his life.
yep, yep. That's a
Yeah.
shame.
Serves him right. Well, this was a good talk, and next week I am super excited for those
Yeah,
that are listening. We've got a great guest on next week. My good friend Delno LB will be on. He is a full time professional actor, um, who I believe currently right now lives in Wichita, Kansas, but he works pretty frequently out in New Mexico, Oklahoma. He's going to be a great guest that we have on
yes,
next week, where we'll probably talk a little bit about more about the Alec Baldwin situation and just kind of what the day in the
yeah,
life is
yeah.
of a full time working actor. So I'm
I'm
excited
looking
to have
forward to
him
that.
on.
Yeah, I'm glad you booked that. That's good,
Yeah.
great.
And so, guys, again, thank you all so much. We just looked at some of our stuff. We're over well over 1,000 downloads now
Yes,
for our
yes,
show, and we saw some of the some of our listeners that listen to us on Spotify. We were the top podcast on a couple of people's Spotify Wrapped, which is huge.
Yep.
Being the most listened group of morons that you guys tune into really does actually mean quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it only goes up from here. So we're excited to continue to grow, to have you guys continue to listen. Make sure if you do check us out, give us a like, give us a share, let someone at work know, let one of your friends know, let anybody know, hey, just give these guys a listen on this thing. I really like this episode they did. And that's how
Yep.
we grow, and
Yep.
that's how we can do more and more and more for you guys.
Yep.
So check us out: Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, right here on Facebook, everywhere that you guys get your podcast needs. We are available. Andy, do you have anything before we sign out?
Nope. Thanks for listening, guys.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we can't wait to talk to you next week.